Hi, I'm JD Park,
I'm TJ Shelley.
and this is One Stop Real Estate. So, today we wanted to talk about a scenario that a lot of you guys are in and that we have all been in at some point. And that scenario is buying your first house.
Yep.
We wanted to give an idea of what would be a good option if we were doing it again and what we would do. So that way, if you guys think of an idea to go down the same route, you can pursue it from our standpoint.
Yeah.
I was giving this a lot of thought on how I would do it, and I recently did it for my first time. But I have a different background than a lot of people.
Yeah.
Especially being in real estate for 3 years, knowing a lot about the business and how to approach it. I would ask myself different questions if I was going to go down this. So I created a general plan in my preparation for this, and the first step that I would recommend going down is taking an account of what's going on in your life.
Yeah.
The reason that I would recommend doing that is so you know exactly what you have to work with.
Yep.
Right? Because if your income's different, if you have a wife and kids, that's going to change your choices and how you want to approach things.
Yeah.
So the questions I would ask in that step would be, how much do I make per month? Am I married? Do I have kids? What are my expenses monthly? Does my wife work? Am I planning on staying in the location that I'm buying in for a longer term? And then what are my financial and personal goals? And then what is my credit score? I feel like that gives you a lot to work with, and it kind of tells you yes or no if you can afford a house or if it's a good idea. Especially the how much do I make per month?
Yeah.
How often do you see people buy homes where their mortgage is more than half of their income?
Yeah. I mean, for loan qualification purposes, it can't be that high.
Mm-hmm.
For net income, it's hard. We look at gross income, not net income, so it's a little bit different. But I always tell people what you are pre-approved for isn't always what you can afford.
Yeah.
A lot of times you have people that will come in and they can be pre-approved for a $700,000 house, but with rates, payments the way that they are, maybe they end up purchasing a $500,000 house instead because that's what aligns with their budget. So it's funny how often I tell people, like, well, you're approved for this, but like, what's your budget? And a lot of people say, I don't know, I'm just looking to see what I can be approved for.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit backwards. You'll want to have a budget in mind.
Yeah.
And it's better to plan on your budget rather than to think, okay, I'll make accommodations or I'll change things to make it work.
And I feel like the how much do I bring in and how much are my expenses are important, because when you get into home ownership, those change a little bit. Where if you're renting, you don't have to pay maintenance items, you don't have to pay water, sewer, trash usually. Usually the homeowner does. Even like full HOA dues. I know that the HOA monthly fee, we typically don't charge that entire amount to a tenant. It's typically like maybe half because it's only justified up to a certain amount. Whereas like the HOA insurance and things like that isn't really a tenant responsibility. So it's things you got to think about, and you really want to give yourself some wiggle room so you're not putting yourself in a bad position. So that would be my first step. Figure out all the parameters of your life. The second question that I would ask myself is, do I know enough about homeownership and real estate? You need to know the good, the bad, the ugly. The good side is it's an investment. You're not just putting money in your landlord's pocket.
Yeah.
You are putting it into the value of your home. You're buying down the principal and gaining equity over time. You are also investing in a physical asset, which will also grow over time. The bad, like I said, maintenance, increased utilities, insurance, and the responsibility of taking care of it. So you have to put time into it as well. And then the ugly, foreclosures, getting tight financially.
Yeah.
If you lose your job and you don't have savings.
Yeah, I don't like those phone calls.
No, I don't think anybody wants to be in that position, but it is a very real possibility if you just bought a home and you lost your job.
Yeah.
So you wanna take into account all of those things. And when it comes to knowing about real estate, you need to know, do I want it as an investment, or do I just plan on living in this for a long time? Or like I said, do you plan on renting it out at some point? Because when you get into your first home, you want to have the end in mind.
Yeah, you want to know if it's either going to be an income generating property for you in the future, or like my first home, I didn't want it as an income generating property, so I bought it with the sole intention of just selling it in a couple of years so I could have equity to purchase a home that I wanted.
Gotcha. So that was your strategy going into
strategy. But along with the you need to know about home ownership too.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew I was comfortable in knowing about real estate, knowing about the financing, because that's my job. When I bought my first home, I'd been doing that for 2 years. So when I bought my first home, though, I bought an older home with half an acre, wasn't in great shape, and I was excited because I was like, oh yeah, half an acre, land's always good to have. It's 4 bedrooms. I'm not married, so I have 3 bedrooms to rent out, and all of it financially or on paper penciled out really well. But then once I moved into the home, I didn't really know how much a new roof cost, so I paid $13,000 for a new roof.
Yeah.
I didn't like the color of it, so I decided to pay somebody to paint the exterior.
Yeah.
And then within my first 6 months of owning it, I'd already shelled out $20,000 just improving it, which was fine, but when I initially bought the house, that wasn't in my budget.
Right.
Luckily I had funds, but it was kind of oh wow, I knew it needed a new roof, but I didn't know that roofs cost that much. Or even the land, it's okay, I actually hate maintaining this much yard. So
right.
There's a lot of things that I learned from that
but you had to learn the hard way.
Yeah,
right?
I had to learn the hard way. So it is if you're buying a house, especially if it's older, it's good to have an idea of what the costs are. And I was working with a new agent too, a newer agent at the time, and I don't think he really was all too comfortable in knowing what he was doing, but he was my friend, so it's worth it to have a good agent, because when you go to negotiate things from the home inspection, your agent, if they're good, will tell you, okay, this is how much it'll cost. Why don't we go and get bids? I just went into it kind of blind. I was like, yeah, like 5,000-10,000, whatever. I'll ask for that in a price reduction or concessions, and I'll just worry about it later.
Yeah.
But I had no idea what the real cost was.
No, that's a good point. If depending on how you want to go about it, if you're looking for a fixer-upper, you need to know the cost of what you're going to be putting into it, because if you put all your money down with the house and you don't leave yourself any room, you have to live with those until you can regain the funds to put towards that. So definitely thinking about that, and knowing who you're with. When I bought my house, I bought new construction, but that wasn't the first houses that I was looking at. I was looking at older homes, and I was willing to fix it up.
Yeah.
My wife, on the other hand, not so much. She wanted a really nice house, no work to be done. And I see that a lot with clients as well, that they don't want to put extra work up to a certain amount once they move in. And so that's a big portion of their criteria. So ask yourself, what am I willing to settle for and work towards with sweat equity? No, that's a really good story, TJ. I like that a lot.
Quick.
Yeah, go for
Dude, I need to get water. Or freaking grab my inhaler. Oh my gosh. Back. Do you want water too? I can grab you a bottle.
I'm okay, thank you though. He was about to die. I'm just gonna let it keep going until he gets back. This might be a good clip. He's just inhaling all the dust from his furnace. I wonder when the last time he changed his filter out. It's probably been a while. Another thing you have to know with home ownership, HVAC filters.
That would probably look like I'm dying, like that entire section. Alright. On a random side thought, I wonder if the concrete would almost look better with the brick in the back.
It might. We can play around with it.
Okay.
Alright. Press R when you're ready.
Oh.
Yeah, press R.
Oh my gosh.
It's okay, you can just start right there.
Okay.
The third question that I would ask myself is, do I want to use it as a future rental property?
Yeah.
On a surface level, I feel like that question's pretty basic, but I don't feel like people understand how deep that rabbit hole goes.
Yeah.
With it being an investment, because a lot of people will invest in stocks or businesses, crypto, whatever it is. But there are 4 benefits of investing in real estate that none of those other ones get. All 4. The first one is principal pay down and building equity in your home. The second one is depreciation, which is a tax advantage. You can depreciate expenses and things like that on your taxes. The third is cash flow. So if your mortgage is cheaper than the rent, then you make that every single month as an income to your bank account. The fourth one is appreciation, and that's when home values go up. When you decide to sell, you make that as profit.
Yeah.
So those are the 4 things. Oh, also when you refinance, you can cash out, and as the value goes up, you can get a lot of that appreciation out if you decide to do that.
And I think even like you mentioned depreciation for tax savings, which is great. It gets smaller and it's diminishing. So obviously the more you depreciate, the less you can depreciate in the following years. But even everything else, like for my rental properties, it's you have gas traveling back and forth from the property. Maybe you communicate with your tenants on your phone. You can write that off, and there's tons of tax advantages or write-offs that you can also take advantage of when owning a property, which is really nice.
And thinking about those things is, do I want to be my own landlord?
Yep.
You know, when you're buying a house and you're like, am I going to use this as a rental? Do I want to be my own landlord? Do I want to pay management? I'm going to have to figure out maintenance. Do I just want to pay somebody else for that? And then if you are going to use it as a rental, do you want to do a house hack in the interim if you're moving into it? And a basic of house hack is you move into a place and then you rent out the other bedrooms. Are you okay with that? If you're married or have a girlfriend, maybe they don't want to if you're living with them.
Yeah.
And so that kind of skews some things. And then you have to think about, do I want to have a multi-unit?
Yeah.
Like a duplex, triplex, fourplex, and I want to live in one unit and then others. So there's a lot of things to think about. And a lot of your capabilities is defined in that first step of figuring out how much can I afford, how much are my expenses, and is this a smart move?
Yeah.
So those are the three questions I would ask. I know that you had prepared a scenario of what you would do, so I'll let you go into that. Um, but for my first actual experience, I wanted to do a house hack or a duplex.
Yeah.
Then I got married and I wanted to do a duplex, but circumstances changed,
Yeah.
and so I bought new construction in a good location where I eventually can move out, buy another property, and then rent out the old one.
Yep.
Once I refinance so that the mortgage is at a better spot for a rental. But you can go ahead and go with what you would do right now
I think
in a scenario like that.
It just depends. Like you said, it's so hard. We could run a million different scenarios and say, what would you do based on X, Y, Z?
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to have people in your corner that you trust that can help you guide through it.
Yeah.
Every first-time homebuyer is going to be in a different spot. I can run through what I did when I bought my first home. Because I wasn't married. I was single at the time, so I knew I could stomach a larger mortgage payment than I was comfortable with just on my own, because I knew that I could rent out rooms for a couple $100 a piece. So I think I really was just going to talk about what you kind of talked about as your first step. Figure out what your plans are with the property, because maybe you don't make that much money. Maybe your debt ratios are too high to qualify, but you have a parent or somebody you can trust to co-sign. If you have people renting out rooms from you, or if there's an accessory unit or it's a multifamily, then it's a way for you to get into a property, keep your expenses low, and have all the benefits of appreciation and home ownership in general. Just what that can do to bring you financial stability in the future. We have other podcast episodes about other things, first-time homebuyer programs, low to no down programs. Understand those, but I really was just going to talk about what you talked about there. Figure out what your plans are with the property, and from there, game plan and identify what might work for you.
Yeah. I know right now there are quite a few opportunities with new construction, with that program that gives you $20,000 down. Is that what you would pursue, or do you think it would be better to put your money into a older property that you could potentially get it at a better value?
Yeah. So if it's me right now in this market, if I don't have any money, then I would take advantage of the $20,000 new construction.
But let's say you make $80,000 a year and you have $50,000 saved up.
So if I had that, I'll run through the other scenario real quick, just because I think maybe even if you have down payment funds, if you're wanting to keep money aside for future investments or different things, with what a lot of builders will incentivize you, or like what their incentives are, whether it's 3% towards closing costs or design center credits, things like that. That combined with the $20,000, I actually think is a great deal.
Yeah.
But if I say I'm in that scenario, I make $80,000 a year, I have $50,000 to put down. I mean, that probably puts me, depending on my other debts, in a qualification range around $400,000. I'd be under the income limits for a lot of the like median income housing programs, first-time homebuyer programs. So I'd probably do a 3% down, just conventional mortgage, keep my costs low. Honestly, depending on if I'm house hacking or not, I would maybe ask to do a 2-1 buy down, just because I think that makes home ownership so much more attainable as far as your monthly payments go. And with that, your income will rise, or hopefully you have the opportunity to refinance permanently into a lower payment.
Yeah.
But if I was a first-time home buyer, I had the funds, I'd probably look at doing something like a 3% down, and depending on how comfortable I am with my monthly payment, I'd do a 2-1 buy down.
Gotcha. The one thing that I do like about having the money is it opens up so much location.
Yeah.
You can pick a better spot, and I mean, everybody knows this, but the number one rule in buying real estate is location, location, location.
Yep.
Because that is what drives an income. I mean, not drives an income, drives a home value up. But also, when it comes to rentals, nobody's going to want to go live out in the boonies.
Yep.
And yes, over time it will develop and it won't be the boonies anymore. But if you're looking to move within 1 to 2 years, I would say it'd almost be worth it to spend the money to buy a property in a better location, knowing that it will rent no problem, than deal with the worry of vacancy in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
And a lot of the new construction places, they buy the land, but where are you going to get that much land?
Yeah.
Places that aren't developed yet.
Yeah.
So that is something I would be wary of. And I mean, I used the 20,000 program when I bought mine because I found a new construction in a place that was in a great location. Very rare find.
Yeah.
I'm proud of that, and I'm very happy with my decision. But location.
Yeah. I was going to say, if it's near term or short term, you want to sell in 1 to 2 years, you're exactly right. It's is the builder going to have time to develop everything? Is the city going to have infrastructure? Because there's a lot in like Eagle Mountain that's still out there. It's a pain to drive out there. There's lots of places to buy, but for me, when I bought my first property, I thought the same thing. If I want to sell it in 1 to 2 years, then I need to go somewhere where there's going to be demand. So I bought it in Provo, close to where they just built a new temple.
Yeah.
In a pretty central part of Provo. So I know from there if it's 1 to 2 years, then location, it's worth it to pay more because you're also leveraging it. You're putting I only put down 3%. So if I'm putting down 3%, you're leveraging a larger asset, and if it's in a good place, you're appreciating over that larger asset.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense.
Yeah. If nothing else, hopefully you at least just think about it. If you haven't bought a house, you just think about it because it's probably more possible and attainable than you think.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you guys for listening.
Yeah, thank you.
The One Stop Real Estate Podcast is a production of Vision Real Estate.
I'm TJ Shelley with First Colony Mortgage, NMLS 1674331, with First Colony Mortgage, company license 3112.